Hello again, everybody. I'm back with a fun and unique mission. This one, although rather easy, has always been one of my favorites. I spent a while trying to figure out if there was some kind of interesting challenge I could take to make the mission a little bit less trivial to win, but there really isn't one that I found that was very engaging. So I'll just relax and have fun and maybe talk about some mythology during the slower moments. Anyway, our story picks up with Castor effortlessly back from Scandinavia.
Good timing, Castor. The troops you sent to teach the Egyptians a lesson.
I think the lights shining from that dock look rather strange at this camera angle.
Your trick worked. The Norse and Egyptian troops started leaving the city 2 days ago. They must have gotten word of your attacks on their undefended homelands.
Good. We should have no problem with the city now.
One more thing, Castor. Our scouts found another of Lord Ouranos' passages nearby. We think it might lead behind the Greek troops. I thought you might like to lead the force that attacks through it.
I think the creepy music tone in the background is a little bit much here. I think it gives things away prematurely. You can hear creepy whispering for some reason.
Where are we?
Well, even Krios knows how to be wrong. This passage has taken us to Mount Olympus.
Captain, we cannot return the way we came.
I can't believe we're on Mount Olympus. How could Krios make a mistake like this?
We must fight our way to the peak of Mount Olympus. There is no other option.
I have absolutely no idea what he's talking about here. We could just walk back down the mountain. How would reaching the summit even help us get back? Well, we'll roll with it because the mission is pretty cool. If you take your human soldiers to these temples, they turn into the Mythian on the statue outside. These Cyclops, of course, are a very good counter to the enemy Hippocans. Although, as I think you might have seen before, they have absolutely terrible AI and must be manually controlled while they run in circles, accomplishing nothing whatsoever. I'll run my reinforcements to the South Temple to turn them into Valkyries. Now you can see that my Valkyries are upgraded, whereas my Cyclops are not, which means that Valkyries will actually be stronger than Cyclops here, leaving aside that instant kill attack with the long cooldown, that is. Valkyries also run about twice as fast, and they require much less micro to achieve basic effectiveness. Plus, of course, they can heal, which is critically valuable. So although I see most people use Cyclops in this mission, I think Valkyries are going to be my choice. I've always been fond of Valkyries anyway. I think I mentioned back in the Norse campaign that they're one of my favorite myth units. Phenomenally useful in and out of this chapter. I think it was a good choice for them to include them despite them not really fitting Greek mythology, of course. It makes for a much more interesting army composition choice than most of the Greek myth units would have. As you can see, this initial phase of the mission is pretty trivial. We just kind of walk around and beat down a few human soldiers. Just getting us used to the idea that we can transform our guys and that this is kind of a fixed party dungeon crawl type mission, I guess. I'll have someone heal poor Castor there. So one cool thing about this mission is that there's a lot of optional places to explore. You can find these shrines and lots of other little bonuses of different kinds. It doesn't make a big difference because the mission is very easy with or without them, but it is, cool to have a reward for exploration. This particular shrine gives us 2 bolt god powers, which will be quite useful later on. So to take out this hero, I will of course have Castor do the tanking, while the Valkyries then join in and help out with some DPS once the hero is focused on Castor. As I've mentioned before, units who are currently fighting or doing other things get healed at 1/10 the normal rate, so Castor's not really getting much here, but it still helps a little bit. 1 HP per second. We will fight quite a lot of Greek heroes on this mission, actually, which might seem appropriate superficially, until you recall that in some of these people's myths they were explicitly barred from Mount Olympus, and the gods smote some of them for their hubris in trying to get here. There were, of course, several Greek heroes who did become gods and get to Mount Olympus. Heracles, of course, is the most well-known, but there was also, for example, Diomedes, who is somewhat more obscure because he doesn't really show up in the Odyssey, only in the Iliad. A few others too, although like most Greek myth things, it depends on your source. I'm going to see if I can pull out maybe just half of those human soldiers. I'll pull them back to the Valkyries, and in particular I want to make sure that the archers are outside the walls before I turn to fight. Anyway, it's another pretty easy fight. I do think it could have been a cooler mission if the battles were a little bit more challenging. Dungeon crawl missions like that really call for that if you ask me. Particularly since once we get through this wall we'll start getting infinite numbers of reinforcements. So there really isn't anything left to make it challenging at that point. Infinite numbers of myth units against finite numbers of human soldiers is not much of a fight. Nonetheless, myth units are fun to use, and it's nice to be able to just convert your units from one type to another and customize your own party that way. It would have been awesome if it was a little bit longer with a few more myth unit types available.
this Olympus passage so they
They say we need to defend this underworld passage, but they won't even try to attack it. Even if I leave these 2 barracks totally unharmed, they won't train even a single soldier to attack the passage. Again, the mission is nearly unlosable. There are only a few particular ways that you can mess up badly enough to actually lose. Alright, let's get these guys transformed. Another wave of cavalry will come attack. The one obstacle you do need to deal with is that they will send endless waves to attack your spawn point here. But this is easily countered if you just keep a small force of Cyclops and Valkyries here. I'll send these Valkyries to assist Caster, and I think I'm going to just delete some of these gates and whatnot. They just get in the way. After all, the enemy doesn't actually try to attack this underworld passage either. I'll micro this Cyclops out so he doesn't get killed. Oh nice, the throne guy squashed them. That doesn't happen very consistently, but of course it's a big help when it does. Okay, let's have Caster fight the human soldiers while the Valkyries tear down the barracks. This one actually does train troops. Note, by the way, that your units won't actually transform into myth units unless you are actively looking at them at the time. That's probably meant to avoid accidentally transforming into the wrong thing. The first one of these shrines we destroy will give us Bolt, quite useful. The second one will give us Curse, which will be okay against masses of human soldiers. The third will actually make our Cyclops a lot better, upgrading them into Elder Cyclops, but it will spawn a giant wave of human soldiers on a wall to block us in. Bit of a waste of time. Okay, these guys here will be my permanent defense force. About 4 Cyclops and 2 Valkyries can hold the line indefinitely. I want to transform some of my Valkyries into Manticores. To make it safe, I'll have Caster pull out the heroes back there. Let's get these guys transformed too. Unfortunately, you can't just shift-click your guys past the temple because, as I mentioned, they have it set up where you must be looking at them for them to transform. Alright, transform and then get in there. I want to make sure I don't accidentally turn all my Valkyries into Manticores. I think I went about 4 or 5 Valkyries to tank and heal, and everybody else can be Manticores, so I can have mass ranged firepower. Better than having your cumbersome melee units trip over each other and most of them not actually fight, of course. So I'm going to order them all together to attack this shrine without looking at them as they go past the temple so that they don't transform. These ones I do want to transform, so I'll order them into position. This shrine will give us the Traitor God power. It can't be used on heroes, unfortunately, but we can steal one of several big myth units that they have on this mission that we can't otherwise obtain.
From the gods.
Alright, I will now look back. I think I want to transform these people into Manticores too. I think it would have been really cool if there were temples hidden off in other places where you could find an optional temple if you did a little side journey. There are lots of different side paths from here, of course. The mission really does open up quite a bit. There are even 2 routes to the primary goal, but one is pretty much just better. Let's have Caster go and aggro the next Chimera. As a post-commentary note, I am sad that I didn't use Traitor on it. I was fixated on using it to grab a Colossus instead. But Chimeras are so much more fun than Colossi, and we get to use them so much less often because we never get to play as Artemis. Man, we're really getting a lot of reinforcements. They come in so fast that I think I spend about half my attention just ordering people to go to a temple, to the underworld passages, and then to the next temple. Oh, these guys didn't transform. That left them vulnerable. Okay, better do some micro again here to make sure the Cyclops actually fight instead of running in circles like idiots. Well, maybe I'll start talking about some mythology here. As with a lot of things in ancient Greek religion, it's important to remember that it existed for a long time across a wide geographic area, and people didn't believe the same things everywhere and everywhen. When I destroy this shrine, by the way, I'll get another copy of the Traitor God power. I'm not sure if I can use both at once or if they have their usual cooldown. I'm going to try it. Unfortunate. It still has the cooldown, so I can only steal 1 Colossus. Getting a second copy of that God power is pretty useless then, given how fast I could win the mission from here. Oh well. I mentioned there are a lot of different possible routes from here. One of those is loading your guys onto that transport ship, but I don't really find that to be very useful. Still, again, a cool level design where there's lots of different paths to the goal. There's a big human soldier wave down there, So I want to have my guys set up the tank properly, I think. Well, anyway. So one of the first things to know about Mount Olympus in Greek mythology is that in the earliest days, they didn't really think of the present-day Mount Olympus as necessarily being the Mount Olympus. Rather, the general notion was that the gods lived in the sky and the highest local mountain would be called Mount Olympus, considered to be the place that's closest to their home. As the Greek cities became more connected, they realized that the modern-day Mount Olympus in Thessaly was the tallest mountain around, and so that just became Mount Olympus. This is a good chance to use the curse god power. We can turn their army into pigs like in Willow. Disparaged by critics though it may have been, I always thought that movie held up pretty well to the test of time. This is the toughest fight in the mission, and it's pretty easy to lose a few guys here. But that doesn't really matter because reinforcements come so fast that it's a nuisance to get them all organized. Even losing the Colossus doesn't really matter much to me. If it was a Chimera, I would have been sad about that. The Manticores with their splash damage attack are of course carrying the team here. Manticores, by the way, like unicorns and a few other things, are less mythological than more of like a bad natural history kind of thing. The Greeks thought that they were real, non-magical animals that just lived in another part of the world. Their books on animals, even into the medieval era when they just basically copy and pasted Greek stuff, were always full of a mixture of real things and bizarre, kooky ones that could certainly never have existed. Well, with this initial wave broken, I can now tear down those barracks and stop the reinforcements. I'm going to try to avoid killing the pigs. If you actually rescue the pigs, you can run them into the temples and turn them into myth units. Well anyway, back to talking about Mount Olympus. People sometimes ask why the Greeks didn't just climb Mount Olympus and verify that their gods aren't actually there. First of all, it's plausible that some of them might have climbed Mount Olympus. The first recorded climbing is around 1900, but it's really not a tall mountain, and we have records of ancient people having climbed taller ones, so it's possible one did. But number one, it's a pretty big mountain. Not tall, just like it has a lot of different peaks, and so it would have been hard to do a search of all of them, of course. But more importantly, even back in the oldest of Greek myths, it's clear that they don't necessarily think of the gods as always being physically present, and they're usually in disguise when they're among mortals. If the gods didn't want to be seen, they weren't seen. So not seeing them up at the top of the mountain would mean absolutely nothing. Not to mention that, for many ancient Greeks at least, the gods were conceived of as existing spiritually more than physically. They didn't necessarily physically have a house up on Mount Olympus, that wasn't the idea. But they might be conceived of as having a spiritual existence that was connected to that place. Another pattern that I observe and find interesting is that, in the later Greek writings, they tended to actually be quite dismissive of some of their own earlier myths. As their understanding of the world became more sophisticated, they began to reject a lot of these stories of the gods, acting like humans. People like Plato and Plutarch just dismissed those stories out of hand as silly, superstitious fabrications, but they still believed in the gods. There we go. I successfully lured the enemy to the underworld passage. Now one of them will actually attack it. Now there's an actual ticking clock. Something to provide an idea of challenge. Well, another thing I wanted to say is that I'm really glad they added this mythological location to the game. One thing I thought was great, but sadly underused in the original release, was how they really only had one mythological location that you played through, the underworld. And they just showed everything as being this lava-filled Greek underworld, even if you were in Scandinavia or whatever. I thought it would have been really cool if there were more mythological locations you could play through. So adding Mount Olympus was pretty great, I think. Well, final fight coming up. The big challenge here is that there are lots and lots of heroes, so I'll bolt down the important ones. Poor Bellerophon getting blasted by lightning for the second time in his life. That was how his original myth ended, pretty much. Anyway, from here we can basically just slug it out. They have a lot of heroes, but we have a lot of myth units, so we can overwhelm them. All we really need to do is break down those walls and get Castor to walk into that central area. Would have been cool to get more heads on these hydras, but a few of them grew extras at least. Hippolyta the Amazon Queen there is a pretty sturdy one. Come to think of it, the creepy whispering that we hear in a few places on this mission might be the unseen gods lurking nearby and commenting. That would fit the mythical idea pretty well. Poor Polyphemus there, trying his best, but he doesn't have a chance.
A mortal stands upon the peak of Mount Olympus. What is happening?
Castor, what are you even talking about? We just fought through hordes of mortals to get up here. They even have military training academies and towns set up.
Quickly! It is our means of escape!
What if we had just walked down the mountain? The villain's whole plan would have collapsed if we'd taken that sensible approach to things. Well, anyway, A fun and unique, if not challenging, mission. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. Have a great day, everyone.